Good evening. Welcome to this episode of Learn Live UAE on the 14th of September. Tonight, Mark and I are really excited to welcome two guests to the show to discuss how they've turned professional reading into professional action. Our two guests this evening are Ben Rothwell, who is Assistant Head at Victory Heights Primary School. He's a founding fellow of the Chartered College of Teaching. He is one of the key players in the UAE Schools Research Network group. He's presented at Research Ed Dubai, and he is almost finished, I think, his MPQH. Our second guest this evening is Russell Smart. He's an assistant head at King's Al Barsha in Dubai. He leads on educational technology. He's a Microsoft Innovative Educator, Google Certified Educator, Seesaw Ambassador. So we're really looking forward to welcoming these two guys onto the show tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. So massive thank you to Russell and to Ben for agreeing to come and share with us on the show this evening. Reading books is all the rage in education at the moment, whether it's books that are specifically linked to education or books which are influential. Simon Sinek, for example, some really popular books, not to do with education, but are fantastic in terms of the application, ways in which you can think about school leadership and all those things around that. So really, really keen to hear from Russell and Ben this evening around all of that, aren't we, Ollie?
Yeah, really looking forward to it. And I think it's such an important topic as well. And we mentioned on our show last week with Dee Saran and James McBlain about how you can kind of get caught up in social media and feeling the need to constantly be up to date with reading books, but it's about being selective with your reading, I think, to make sure that it's purposeful for you as an individual rather than just churning through loads of books. And I remember, a recent a little bit of
sharing,
I guess, I've lost for words there, came out from the Education Endowment Foundation this week. It was a rapid evaluation assessment on remote professional development. And it indicates the importance of video, if you look at one of the key findings, and how both CPD doesn't have to be solely the teacher watching videos, but it can also be the teacher videoing themselves and then watching that back as part of a reflective dialogue. And that's great to see that coming out from the EEF. Certainly in this time where there's more online professional development than there's probably ever been. And in tune to that, we have on our YouTube channel actually started to create playlists that are customized to different facets within education, as you can see on the diagram here. We've obviously got playlists for season 1 and season 2, but then we've also got other playlists such as remote learning, leadership, and so on. But that's not the focus of tonight's show. I'd like to kind of bring it back, actually, Mark, to a tweet that you put out back in the back end of 2019. I remember sharing this at a conference, the Guest Education Show, and I think this really struck a chord and resonated with me. So if permit me if I will, but your tweet said that buying loads of edu books for CPD in a library doesn't actually improve teaching and learning by itself. And I think that's massively important. It's about, as you've said, the follow-up, coherent discussions and cross-fertilization and planning based upon your findings through reading. So there's so much to it. And if I could just give a tiny shout out to my school, we obviously have a library, and one of the many facets that we are staffed to do is we publish a teaching and learning newsletter. Each half term we ask staff to put into that newsletter something about a book that they've read and how it has actually helped their thinking and their teaching. But it's not about us, it's about our guests. So if we can take the presentation down and actually find out what Russell and Ben have been up to with their edu books.
Yeah, brilliant. Really looking forward to that. And I'll bring them in just a second. So we'll do a shout out to our viewers this evening as well. So a big thank you and welcome to Niall Statham, who's joined us this evening. So welcome for joining us. We've got Al Kingsley with us as well. Thank you very much for joining us, Al. And really pleased to bring both Ben and Russell into the live studio now. Welcome, Russell. Welcome, Ben. How are you both doing?
Yeah, evening both. Really good, thank you. Yeah, I'm doing well. Thanks for inviting me. It's been a busy day, but it's a pleasure to join your show.
Absolutely. I was asking before the show, Ben, about how you're getting on with the side job as a chef with your whites on there, but I'll move away from the jokes and things. It is important we can have a smile from time to time, but it's really tough out there at the moment, isn't it? With things changing all the time. We had a conversation before we went on air about the issues you're all facing inside your schools. With things being like they are at the moment, it must be really tough. Not only trying to implement the things you've got in your development plans, your improvement plans, all those different things, whilst balancing all the things which seem to be changing on a daily basis. We try to be responsive on the show. Ben, I know you watched the press conference which happened quite recently this evening. Were there any sort of key findings you can share with anybody who's watching the show this evening from that?
Well, it was a worry, to be honest. I think every educator in the UAE has a bit of trepidation when you hear that there's a press conference, because you're worried that we're going to revert back to distance learning. Luckily, it wasn't that. It was to do with success in a stage 3 clinical trial in the UAE. So that's hopefully a bit of good news that will move us a little bit closer to being out the other side of this situation. I'm sure we'd all appreciate that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, thank you both for agreeing to come on the show and share with us this evening. I know that sometimes doing these sort of things can be sort of stepping outside your comfort zone a little bit, but we promise to try and catch you in rather than catch you out. And we're really our aim is to try and provide a platform for the great educators and leaders from across the region to be able to share some of the things and the great things that are happening. The UAE is a real hotbed of innovation and sort of forward-thinking practice. So, Ollie and I are really grateful for you giving of your time this evening to share with us. I'm just going to jump straight in with the questions first of all, with you, Russell. First question for you, Russell, is how do you see professional reading as being like an integral part of your professional development, both as a teacher and as a school leader? Can you share some thoughts on that, please?
Yeah, from my perspective as a leader, I think I had lots of teachers when I first went into a leadership role. I had lots of teachers coming to me, and I think they kind of expected me to have all the answers. And it became very apparent I'd have to go and find those answers out. And certainly in the early days, I was trying to rely on teaching experience and classroom experience of my own practice, really, which then now it's almost like a distant memory. I'm still in the classroom a little bit, but not as much as I'd like to be. So it's very much for me now important to keep on top of my reading. So if someone comes with a question, I can respond. I can also put things into practice myself to see what's working and what's not working. You said already about the vast number of books out at the minute. It'd be an absolute minefield of choosing the right ones. And I'm hoping in my leadership role, I'm able to show others at least what might be working for them and what doesn't work as I go through, really.
That's a brilliant response. Thank you for that, Russell. Have you got I mean, Ollie's got a specific question there, but have you got an example you could share with us where you've done that with your colleagues in school?
I've got particular books that have really stood out to me over the years. Talent Architects is a great one. It's been linked and reunited to some of the agenda that we've got at school. We're going to chat dual coding later. I know Ollie's going to keen to find out more about that one. Kate Jones, Love to Teach, such a practical guide. I tweeted recently about being in the slow reader group. I very much am a slow reader. A book really has to grab my attention, whether that's an edgy book or even a novel. So for me, books like Kate's book, the dual coding book by Ollie as well, they grabbed my attention. They gave me practical ideas. I was able to try them out pretty much straight away. And that was really beneficial for me being in the slow reader group.
That's it. When you've got practical examples, that are grounded in the classroom as well, it is really good to be able to sort of have those things to sort of inspire you and give you things to reflect on, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Kate's book is an example. I know it's been tweeted and retweeted loads, particularly around UAE as well. And Kate came into King's a couple of years ago to share her expertise. It's one of those books where you can just pick up, you can take her ideas, put them in the context of your classroom or in school. I just really like a book that actually gives you that advice, rather than gives you a bit of great. It's great to have the theory, don't get me wrong, and then put it into your own context. But if someone can say this works, this is why it works, and this is what it's going to look like in your classroom or in your school, for me, that just ticks so many boxes.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. That's one of and Dee mentioned this last week on the show, didn't she, Ollie? One of her favourite books, and one of mine as well, is actually what does this look like in the classroom by Carl Hendrick and Robin, and previous guest Robin McPherson, taking those ideas of research and pedagogy, and then giving you practical ways in which you can then start about thinking about what that might look in the classroom is so useful, isn't it? Ollie, over to you.
I could jump to Ben then, if I will. Ben, can you just sort of describe the approach that you take at Victory Heights Primary School in relation to professional reading, and then how you take those ideas and turn them into tangible action points?
Yeah, so we're always saying everything that we do at Victory Heights that we're a developing tool, and we're certainly nowhere near mastery in terms of the practice that we have. But in terms of reading, it started off really, and not one to blow my own trumpet, but I was sort of the one that started to introduce like a book club to school. That was probably 3 or 4 years ago that we had a book club as part of our CPD afternoons, which we do every Tuesday afternoon. And we had around about 12 teachers actually decided to come to that. And we read Battle Hymn of the Tiger Teachers, which is the story of the Michaela Free School in London, which is a fantastic book. And then more and more teachers started to get interested in reading, and not just books. We're talking about blog posts and tweeting as well. And we have a couple of members of staff now who really big on Twitter. So Steve Collier and Danielle, who tweets under Educator Abroad, and so they're heavily involved in sort of reading beyond the school walls, as you like. Last year, we had a bit of a dabble, and it sort of refers back to Mark's tweet with giving books to all of the staff in the school. And it's fair to say that we didn't necessarily succeed with that. The way that we approached it, we thought that everyone would engage in those books. Now, last year was terminated early in terms of CPD as we sort of switched into sort of a crisis management mode come the distance learning thing. But there were sort of things that we would take out of that, and we don't realise that they don't necessarily work. And so the way that we've moved this year is that we've got a much smaller teaching and learning team, and they will be responsible for being involved in the reading of blogs, listening to podcasts, reading books, and then disseminating the knowledge that way. We will share key readings with staff when we think they're appropriate, but ultimately, especially now, is that staff have not got the time to be heavily involved in reading. And as much as I wish that wasn't the case, we are in a situation right now when staff their backs are against the wall and they are just concentrating on teaching. And we will move, hopefully, as we move through this, to a situation where we can start to introduce more and more things like this, positive things for development of schools. But at the moment, we're not thinking strategically on the ground in schools. It's nothing to do with that. It's about dealing with the here and now.
Brilliant, Ben. And actually, we got a comment from one of our live viewers, Mark Ryan, previous guest, who says, will anyone have any time for reading in the next few months? I'm just trying to keep awake after work. And it is that difficult part of trying to balance, wanting to stay on top of your game, thinking about how you can get inspiration to support what you're doing. Al actually has shared a book that I shared with him, actually. I think I've lent it to him, actually, which is called Rewiring Education by John Couch, which is a great book for sort of thinking about teaching and learning with technology. But there's so much to think about. Ollie, you wanted to mention something about the book club approach as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, Ben, sort of from your experience of running that, it's obviously well established within your school and has evolved into something else. But for any schools out there that are looking to start a book club, what advice would you give to them, taking into consideration the current climate?
Taking into consideration, I wouldn't mandate it. It would necessarily be optional. Obviously, I think there are still teachers there that would be involved, because what I try and say to staff is that there will be wins for them in terms of their time. So that they may have to give a little bit in terms of time of reading the book and actioning upon it, but eventually what we're aiming for is that we're going to win back some of that time. And a lot of the initiatives that we've rolled out in the school over the past few years that have come from ideas that we've seen in blogs and books have won teachers' time. But that's a hard sell. Teachers understandably a bit skeptical about whether in the here and now that there's going to be a value proposition for them reading. So I would make it optional. I would encourage, and I would personally, if I was to do it now, if I was to start a book club at this point in time, I would point to some of the successes that we've had over the past few years and said these have organically grown out of previous book clubs. So look where that has taken us as a school. Look at the fact that we now do whole class feedback rather than marketing books. Look at the time that we've won back for the staff by investing in our professional reading. And hopefully I would imagine there would be a positive response to that.
Jumping onto that point there as well, Ben, I've followed you on, like Russell for some time on social media and seeing the things you share. That's kind of a similar approach to how you look at things with your educational technology as well. I've seen the ways in which you've used Google Sheets, for example, to try and automate processes. It always seems to come from a place of where you're trying to reduce the amount of time teachers have to spend doing, tasks that would take them a lot of time and make their lives a little bit easier so they can focus on the core business of doing their job.
Absolutely, yeah. But at the end of the day, I want teachers to have the most amount of time to prepare amazing lessons for the children and take the children's experience to new heights. And every step that we can remove out of that. And in fact, I was thinking earlier on, where did my relationship with professional reading start from? Because it definitely isn't something that's gone back to the beginning of my career. But I remember I read a book by someone called Joe Kirby, who at the time I think was deputy head teacher at Michaela. He wrote a blog called Pragmatic Reform, and he spoke about hornets and butterflies. So that school have these ideas, these concepts called hornets, which are very low impact but very high time impact on teachers, and the butterflies, which are less time intensive, have a huge benefit to the children and the learning process. And that was really the sort of the moment where I was like, you know what? That's right. And that's what led me into looking at Battle Hymn of the Tiger Teachers, because Joe was there, and sort of that was the start of my career.
That's a great response. Thank you ever so much, Ben. Linking to that and thinking some of the things you were saying as well, Russell. Obviously, you've trained to be a teacher, and we talked about you being part of the slow reader group. In fact, Mark Ryan did comment about Twitter being great for slow readers, so you can keep that word count down. So thanks for the comment there, Mark. He's come up with a question as well, which I'll bring back in just a few minutes. But jumping into this idea of professional reading, if I think back to when I first started, when I was trained to be a teacher on my BEd and the things I read then, and what I know now, there's that whole sort of, if I knew then what I know now sort of thing. But can you share a book that had the most impact on you right back when you first sort of started training to become a teacher, and then reflect back on that and compare it to what you know about what works for teaching and learning now? Is that possible for you, Russell?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Cast my mind back, I think we're going about 17, 20-ish years now. There's probably a couple of books that actually stood out to me. Would probably be the Aidan Chambers book, Tell Me, and another English race book, which was the Reading Environment. I forget the author off the top of my head. It's interesting what Ben was saying, actually. I certainly can't pinpoint a time where reading educational books was it grabbed my focus. Certainly going through uni, I read them because we had to for our assignments and dissertations. I certainly didn't enjoy reading them at all. But those two books, Reading Environment and Tell Me, they meant so much to me. So if you're not familiar with Tell Me, it's very much the way you're approaching the questioning of books with children. And you asked as well about the impact it's had. It's probably the only book and kind of ways of doing things I've actually used pretty much year on, year out, right up to last academic year. I haven't used it this academic year yet, but just getting children to talk about books, the way you elicit their responses, the way you just drip feed in little prompts for them here and there. To be honest, that practice hasn't changed for me, but very much in agreement with Ben. It's only been in recent years that I've been picking up books for kind of development and practice now. I think a lot of it was CPD back in the UK, either through what was then the local authority, specialist teachers. I was one of those specialist teachers for ICT back in the day, so I was delivering these to people as well. But certainly reading was not on my agenda for probably the first 9 years of my career. I mentioned it earlier about since I became a leader, I've been assistant head at King's now for the last 6 years. And even of those, it's probably been the last 4 years maybe where books have played a part in that role, which has been kind of quite a turnaround for me. But the original question about the book that has most impact still go back to tell me, and I'm still using it today.
That's really interesting. I read a blog post from somebody who I'm going to do a bit of a shout out in 2 ways. Tom Sherrington posted today on his blog about the sort of 3 most impactful ways to do questioning in the classroom. And it's nothing groundbreaking. It's think, pair, share. Cold calling and checking for understanding, and those are staples that have been part of our practice for ages. But the point he makes in it, and I'm really excited. Ollie and I were talking beforehand. Tom's agreed to come and be a guest on the show in a few weeks as well, so I'm really excited to have him on and sort of pick his brains on a few things as well. And that leads me into Niall Statham, who's also commented that one of his favourite books of the summer was the Learning Rainforest Field book, alongside some other ones there, such as Science of Learning and Education Exposed from Sam Strickland. But it goes back to what you were saying there, Russell, about some of those. There are some things that really do stand the test of time, don't they?
That's it, and I think that's been the issue with some of the books. If they haven't grabbed my attention, some of the books over the they've been a nice read, but actually putting them into practice, it just hasn't worked for me, or hasn't worked in the context. It hasn't been a school priority, therefore it maybe didn't get the time that it needed. Ben talked about the pressures of last academic year as well. I can think of a couple of year leaders at our school at the moment who, for them, reading, they switch off through reading these books. But for others, to find time, and Mark's question earlier about finding time, it's not on their agenda at the moment, and maybe it wasn't on the agenda last academic year either, to sit down with a book, because that's just not what floats their boat as such.
It's a great question, that. We're kind of leading into one of the other questions via our discussion so far. And with so many books available to teachers now, it feels like there's a new book coming out every other week, as well as, loads of amazing bloggers, as well as social media, as well as, online conferences like this. What advice would you both give then to school leaders and to teachers about how to stay on top of effective practice while ensuring that you're still consistent in the classroom and focus on standards?
Do you want to take that one?
Go on, Ross. You go. Do you want to
go? No, you go. You go.
So, I remember last week on the show that James mentioned that you've not got to go looking for problems. You've got and you've not got to go looking for cures. Rather, you've not got to make up problems that don't exist. You need to identify the strengths and weaknesses of your own school, and then the professional reading comes around that, and then you can pick up things. So thinking back to when we looked at the book about Michaela, the Battle Hymn of the Tiger Teachers, one of the things that came out of that, we were thinking about how we develop routines at the start of the year. And it wasn't something that we were desperate to address, but it was something that we were thinking, how can we get a consistency in terms of the routines that children have around school? And it's actually, reading that book was quite enlightening, because in terms of consistency, you don't really think about how important it is. You think, well, each primary class, they've got their teacher that does a certain way of doing things. But then these children, certainly in the UAE, have a lot of interaction with specialists. And if the way that specialists deal with behaviour and the management of that changes from specialist to class teacher, it becomes quite confusing for a child to know what to do and what's expected of them. And so then that led us to think, actually, we need to sort of try and build a standard. And from that, and it was an idea that was in that book about a boot camp at the beginning of the year, where children at Michaela enter in year 7, and they have a week before everyone else arrives to learn all of the routines and processes and expectations of Michaela. Now, we don't do a week without the rest of the children, but the first week or two of our year is dedicated to boot camp and developing those routines and embedding them. So children don't have to think about what's expected of them, that their concentration and their thought process can go into learning. And it does lose us 2 weeks at the beginning of the year, where we put a tremendous amount of effort into a boot camp, but the benefits that you see out of the back of that are massive. And so for me, that will be a very practical example of how we've implemented an idea from a book, but without making up a problem that didn't exist. It was organically developed from reading that book.
That's a really good point, actually. And I had an email, it wasn't linked to your original question, Ollie, but I had an email from a parent last week questioning why they hadn't received the Year 3 syllabus and curriculum maps and all these different things. I had to reply to them very politely, along the lines of, your child's settling very nicely, and our focus is well-being on your child and in routines. And it's so nice to hear that other schools are going down that route as well. It was just so important for us. We've barely touched a place value grid in the last 2 weeks or anything else. It's been about getting our children back in, getting them feeling safe, secure, and happy ultimately. And although you then use the phrase kind of 2 lost weeks, and kind of those 2 weeks are actually then massively set them up, don't they, for the rest of the academic year. So I'm happily replied, they're not going to receive their Year 3 syllabus until Thursday.
Right on. Yeah, massively. Building routines at the start of the year, it's just a huge benefit that you see. Like talking with my computing teacher head on, we do a thing, so we're a Google Apps school, and we've got Year 1 children at the beginning of the year, and I could go around and log the machines on under a joint login, which would be fine, and it takes me 5 minutes to do a classroom. But a couple of years ago, I was like, well, I'm sure we could probably teach them to do it, and it's carnage for the first few weeks. It's horrendous. But 3 or 4 weeks in, we've got 50-60% of the Year 1s logging in, and then that's such a time saver, because think about every lesson when they're using the device, the time that the teacher's saving, the time that they're getting back. But it looks horrendous at the beginning, and you think, oh, we should just get straight into it. We should just log them on because that'd be quicker. But it's the same as learning to tie your shoelaces. You've got to do it at some point. You might as well learn how to do it as quickly as you can. Routine.
No, I completely agree with you, and say from a similar teaching background, it really is worth going through those hard yards and getting those things done quickly and getting them embedded really, really well, because there's always that pressure, isn't there, of actually, oh crikey, we've got this curriculum to cover, we've got this content to cover, but actually if you focus on the core business of what it involves to teach and learn inside your environment, whether you're a geography teacher or a history teacher or a computing teacher, having those conditions for success that you can then build upon, it goes back to metacognition and all those different things. Once you've got those things really readily shared and the children understand it and that's how you work, then you're far more ready to actually have that sort of success with your classes, aren't you? Linking on to the example that Ben gave there, Russell, you shared with us that another book you've been looking into is the Dual Coding with Teachers book from Oliver Caviglioli. Have you got any examples of that, how you've been sort of working with that either as yourself and trialing it with your classes or with some of your colleagues and some of the impacts you might have seen from that as well?
Absolutely. Well, I've got it next to me. There's a very well-thumbed edition of the book. This is definitely one of those books for me that... very much a guide of doing things. I absolutely loved flicking through. Kind of on a personal note, it was an interest of mine anyway. Got a bit of a graphics background way back when, so it had that interest. So straight away it grabbed my focus and my attention. With regard to identifying a problem in school, it was very much looking around some of the presentations or the slides that we're sharing with our children, and having to take a slow walk backwards out of the room again and just thinking, what on earth are we sharing at times? Whether that was paragraph upon paragraph of text going up on the screen. We had, I think, every color under the sun might have been displayed at one particular time. We had some beautiful images. They really were absolutely astounding images to complement those paragraphs of text. But to me, it just felt far too busy. And it was at a time when I happened to be flicking through the book as well. And there's, again, lots on social media, absolutely huge amount on Twitter. That's very much my source of my starting points for CPD. So for me, going through this book and this real practical guide of this is what it could look like. And then I know Ben's put some things on Twitter as well about some of the knowledge organisers that he's created, which look absolutely stunning. And kind of my OCD of getting everything aligned, it ticks so many boxes. With regards to putting into practice, it started with me. Although I'm not class-based entirely, I do cover classes, and I teach on a regular basis in year 3 and year 4. So it literally started off with the lessons that I was delivering. I would kind of dual code them as such, kind of meant a bit of extra work for me, kind of redoing the teacher's planning and resourcing. But what I was trying to show them is ultimately the goal and that vision of what I was hoping to achieve, and that sort of clarity of organisation of ideas. For those teachers that maybe didn't have the time or the initial interest, I was sharing with them how easy the book was to follow, broken into different sections, whether you're looking at presentations or like the graphic organisers, the different parts. So it was really, really quite nice. And with regards to expertise as well, what I loved in the way this particular book was set out was going from that real novice level through to more the advanced steps. Impact in the classroom, just for me, it's simplicity up on that board, getting those real key ideas, and then as a teacher, I'm elaborating on them, making that link with the visual. And some of us, particularly our vocabulary we're sharing with children, we share, certainly at the start of the majority of lessons, sort of a key vocab slide of complicated text that might come up in that particular lesson. And where possible, just popping a quick image by the side really helps some of our learners with English second language, or certainly English wasn't spoken too frequently at home. That was really key for me. And then for me, it was never you have to do it this way. But what I was trying to show teachers is this is what it might look like, and this is how easy I found it. And then chatting to the children, okay, almost which one do you prefer? Maybe not quite in that open question, but seeing how they were finding it as well really came through. It's been nice to see over the last kind of 18 months, it's been drip fed through. And I still to this date not said you have to do it this way, but it's been nice to see teachers taking it on board and certainly weaving it in. It's been key for me. It's been really nice to see.
It is really satisfying, isn't it? It's when you deliver some training or show things to colleagues and they sort of take it and run with it. It's really, really rewarding. Sorry, Ben, I spoke over you then, Ben. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I'm in exactly the same place as you, Russell, with that regards to sort of the design of how we present information. And you pointed out that you'd seen some of my stuff, and I was in the same situation, seeing some of the content that teachers were producing. The content in itself was fantastic, but the way that it was presented, there were fundamental flaws with how it was presented, which means that children weren't able to access it, or it was cognitive overload for them. And even such things as pointing out to teachers about how the eyes track across the page, and you read and you look for grids and things like that. And teachers, when they get an understanding of that, it suddenly starts to click in. And when we started on the lockdown back in May or March even, I did some templates for online learning for our year 2 team, who were finding it difficult, because year 2 is a challenging year group for online learning, because they're expected to be quite independent, and so you're producing materials, but they do struggle to access it. And I produced some templates, things with dual coding, like the icons to signify what it is. This is a thinking activity, this is a writing activity, thinking about where they're going to present their work. So an icon for a book or an icon for Seesaw. Those simple practices. And the year 2 team came back and they were like, this has been an amazing turnaround. And parents were like, this has just changed our lives. And just a very simple tweak has massively improved the practice of that year group, and the learning that you imagine then that has increased from that, and it's been exponential. And from this year, other year groups were starting to then hear of this like mythical template, and they were like, oh, can we get involved in that? I'm like, sure, absolutely. And like, it's not for sale, it's for free. I work at the school, you can have whatever you want. I want to make things better. But I've got the same as you, Russell, the OCD thing of seeing, like, why can't you just have the same fonts on the screen, and why is that writing in bright green against a white background? And it blows my mind. And I'm very pleased this year that we've got Danielle has come and joined us, and she's got much the same feelings towards fonts and design and things like that. And we sit there and have a moan amongst ourselves about some of the things that we see.
That's a great point there.
For me. Sorry, I'm loving this.
It's part though as well, isn't it? When you look at the broader picture of that common language of learning across the school, and sort of tying those things in. I just want to bring in a comment here from Niall Statham. Saying good points, Russell, but I'll add to that, Ben, as well. It's also worth remembering that sometimes it's not necessarily the problem that you have with reading and then trying to adopt things. It can be like Mark has said, that sometimes less is more, and it's those refined tweaks that enable us to improve our practice and improve the learning in the classroom.
I will jump in there though, because not everything that Mark says can be taken as being true, because he has just come in and said that green and white can work. So let's take it with a bit of a pinch of salt. But in recognition of your sharing, actually, Ben, and that's one of the I share about Twitter being like the best staff room in the world, and the things you do, and I see so much from your output, Ben, where you share so much so freely. It's really lovely and a real hallmark of a great educator who does that. So it's not just me saying thank you, but like Nathan Sadler, another school leader from the UAE, has joined us, and he's saying thank you as well, saying that they were great as well. So it's not just us sort of saying these things. It's really great to see the impact that you're having in the work and sharing that you're doing. So thank you very much for that. But I've jumped right over Ollie, who wanted to jump in there. So I will zip it now. Stop talking about
part of a live show, isn't it? This one's open to either of you, gents. Could you just share what you think pitfalls might be for teachers or for leaders when it comes to implementing practices that they actually find described within books to their own specific context?
I can kick that one off. And you've said it already, it's about context for me. There's been so many books, I think I mentioned it already, there's been so many books I've read, and I just thought that's not going to work at our school. I've also worked at schools, fortunately not in the UAE, schools back in the UK, where it felt like we were adopting everything that was taking place at the time. Now, I've been out here for 9 years now, so we're talking a long time ago, but it felt like we were never really seeing things through. And then next academic year, it was something else that was new and whizzy, and let's all try it. So it meant resourcing it again, and more CPD and time taken out of that, and then be something different the following year as well. Lots of the things that I've jumped on has been from recommendations via Twitter or colleagues. Maybe there's been I've seen it working somewhere else. Going back to the point about Ben sharing, I can think when I first came out to Dubai, I don't know what other people's experiences were like, but it felt like you worked at your school and you never spoke to anyone beyond your school. I feel like it's a completely different place now. Through different organizations out here, you can share that best practice beyond King's or beyond Victory Heights, whatever it might be. And school groups that would not be seen talking to each other 9 years ago are now openly sharing things either via Twitter or through the groups out here. So I think my big one is probably just having experienced it myself in the past, is leaders just taking on too much and not identifying one specific area or a couple of different areas to work on. We've had, for the last few years at King's, we've had literally just 3 priorities. They've been key priorities, and we've kept them going year on year. Made tweaks where needed, but with the staff, they're aware of what those priorities are. They're aware of why they're a priority as well, and what that might look like in their classroom. With regards to readings, they might then go away and read particular books that link to those priorities themselves. There might be particular key texts that we encourage them to read, or extracts from it, or different ways of sharing it via our own CPD. But ultimately, I've just kind of witnessed too much being taken on in the past, and trying to do too much and not doing any of them in a half decent job for me, which I've also been guilty of at times.
And that's the mark of a good school leader as well, actually, recognizing and sharing that you don't get it right all the time as well. I've certainly been guilty of some of those things as well. Did you want to follow up on Russell's sort of intro into that part of the question?
To agree, absolutely. Context is king. A lot of books are written about state schools in the UK, so you have to think that certainly for us, we're in a slightly different environment. There are things that factors, such for example, we have fee-paying parents, and that does impact on certain practices that maybe schools in the UK, state schools, will be saying, well, we're not going to do that. It's a waste of teachers' time. Like reports, for example, like as much as we would love to completely get rid of like full written reports, we scale back as far as we can, but we still have to be aware of the context that we're acting under. And yeah, I think with the pitfalls, again, you can do too many things. You can keep implementing new ideas. You need to be aware of your context, and you need to be aware of your values. What is it that we want to become as a school? What are our core values? Schools will have different values. King's has got different values to Victory Heights, broadly similar, I would imagine, but we do have different ways of doing things. But you need to be confident in what your values are. Don't just bring in everything. And I think for me as well, obviously we talk about Twitter a lot, but there are people on Twitter that I have grown to respect the opinion of. And so I look for their viewpoint, and they will recommend books and ideas and say, we've used this. And that sort of just further amplifies the theory to me. Oh, that is a good idea. That is a workable idea. So I will read a book. So for example, The Battle Hymn of the Tiger Teacher. And then I start seeing people on Twitter like John Hutchinson and Claire Seeley talking about some of the concepts that have come out of that. And then you learn to trust that person's opinion. You sort of implement something that they said is working effectively. And then I use that as a sort of barometer to gauge what is that we should really be investing in.
There's also a danger, sorry, Mark, there's also a danger as well. And I've seen people on Twitter, and I've worked with some people like this as well, who kind of on the flip side, they're reading book after book after book, which is absolutely great for them and big up to them. But also as well, for me, I would like to think, and I hope my team would agree with me, that I can show or try and put things into practice in either my own class or their classes. I've worked with people who are reading countless books, and they celebrate it on Twitter, of course they do, but can they actually put anything into practice? And kind of, I would question some of it as well.
No, I agree. Yeah, you need to be able to do, not just say and promote.
Yeah, I agree as well. I mean, some great comments in like context is absolutely king, and that sort of thing goes across all sorts of things within schools. Al's sort of jumped in. I did pop his comment up a second ago, but I'll bring it into that because it leads into the next question I want to ask, where he's talking about read and absorb, but ultimately go with your gut. Our job as school leaders is then really to sort of act as a bit of a filter between all the sort of great content that's out there. And it's certainly, like you said, Ben, important to hear the voices of trusted sources like Claire Seeley, as you mentioned, and John Hutchinson. The question I wanted to ask next sort of links in with what you've been saying, and you've kind of answered it in some ways already, because managing change in schools is really hard, and it's never been so any more difficult than we've had it during the last academic year. I mean, and Al sort of said it a little bit with it sort of going with your gut and things, but how do you know what a good one looks like? And how do you make sure you don't follow the latest shiny ideas shared in books? So you've covered that a little bit. Have you got any more advice around that at all, either of you, please?
Go on, Ben.
Yeah, no, it's a difficult one. I see every week John Catt launching a new book, and it's great to see so many really talented authors, and people I follow on Twitter, people I read blogs, people who are friends here in the UA. You see amazing books coming out, and you're seeing sort of, so Tom Sherrington will do a book and then another one because it's been so popular and brilliant. Like Tom Sherrington books are amazing. And then I see Oliver Cavalioli is doing a graphic organizer book. So there is a lot of information coming out, and I don't know how anyone can keep up with it. I'm reading a book called Education Exposed at the moment by Sam Strickland, which is great, but these past 3 or 4 weeks have just been crazy, and I've not had the chance to even pick it up, even though it is leading a school in times of uncertainty. It would be really relevant to the situation we're in now. So I think in terms of what a good one looks like, you do have to go with your gut. You do have to rely on all. For me, a lot, it's authors that have a history for me, authors that I've seen things from, authors that perhaps engage on Twitter, and I see that their engagement on Twitter means that they're authentic, that they're not just an author that's popped up out of somewhere. And certainly bias will come into that. I follow certain people on Twitter. My viewpoints and my educational philosophy is aligned perhaps with those people. So there will be people that I probably wouldn't leap out to purchase their book. But I think that again goes to, you've got to believe in your own values and your school philosophy. And yeah, that would be my major way to avoid a pitfall.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ben. Thanks both, Russell and Ben. This discussion has been brilliant this evening. We've had fantastic engagement both in the sort of the chat that comes on through Periscope and YouTube. But if and you both might have sort of missed this because you've been sort of chatting with us, but there's been some fantastic engagement on Twitter, mentioning Twitter again as well. So we've had comments from Lee Garrett, for example, saying about how he appreciates the honest and reflective approaches to the conversation we've been having this evening as well. We're getting towards the end of the show. Ollie, did you want to jump into that first of our two sort of regular questions?
Yeah, sure. Given that the show is all about professional learning and reading, could you both recommend a non-educational book that's had a positive impact on you as an educator and leader?
Do you want me to go?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm get pulled up for cheating on this one, but it's Bounce by Matthew Syed, which was illuminating for me when it talks about things like the Williams sisters and how actually what we perceive to be like a natural born talent was actually something completely different, and the amount of hours that they put in, and the fact that the Williams sisters' father gave up his job to basically become a full-time tennis coach. And again, Tiger Woods, the fact that his dad was taking him to the driving range when he was 18 months old, and Tiger Woods was practicing his putting, and it goes back to like the Anders Ericsson 10,000 hours of practice, the Carol Dweck. So it is loosely aligned with education, but I think for me, schools talk a lot about gifted and talented as if it's an innate thing that people have, that they're born with good genetics, whereas actually hard work goes a long way. And if we can actually reinforce that message to children that hard work is king, then for me that's a positive. Children don't need to be put in artificial boxes and think that their intelligence and their outcomes are limited. So Bounce was really illuminating for me in that sense.
Brilliant, thank you. Angela Gelder, a viewer, just sent through Rebel Ideas by Matthew Syed as well. And interestingly, on that same topic, and I meant to tweet it as my morning tweet this morning, actually, but I didn't. But I'll ping you the link over. Somebody, a coach from NFL team in the US, had in the NFL to get into the stuff. And I think you might have lost me for a second there. Sorry. Yeah, so to get into NFL, you've got to go through these different stages. But what they do with these young men who want to sort of get into the football league is they get in touch with their old coaches, and they're interested in things like, you know, how quick they can do 40 yards, 50 yards, 100 yards, all these sorts of things. But on top of that, they ask questions about dedication, whether did they have time on class, you know, all these different things. And it is those hard yards, isn't it, that you show right back when you can really differentiate between success and not success. And that's a great example there from yourself, Ben. Thank you. Russell, how about yourself for your book?
My book, I'm quite keen on different biographies from a non-educational perspective. And you know, one controversially I really liked, read it many years ago, was how Duncan Bannatyne from Dragon's Den started up. It was one of those ones where you read about the innovation. I think it was from starting up an ice cream truck way back when, and it really was like, we almost like, why didn't I think of that type moment? I've used it quite a few times in an education context as well with the children, just think about their entrepreneur skills, etc. as well. Different sports biographies, again, linking it through education, sharing with children. It's not always success at the beginning, lots of resilience along the way. Anything I can read very easily, to be honest with you, Mark.
That's really good again. Thank you so much, Russell. Our final question for this evening is a bit off-piste for the topic, but we do ask it to all of our guests on the show. And I'll ask you first, Russell, if that's okay, sticking with you. Can you recommend a technology, an EdTech tool that makes your working life easier, and why, please?
Okay, can I do two? Is that cheating?
Yeah, absolutely. That's fine. Yeah.
Then there are going to be no surprises to people at school, or even probably people in general. One's got to be Apple Classroom, just shipping out, navigating children through websites with ease, opening apps. It was a revolution. I think it was only about 18 months ago I started to use it on a regular basis in my class, just getting very young children to manage their iPads with ease. And then more recently, I found myself using Google Keep with the post-it notes a lot. I find myself in our leadership meetings, which tend to be lengthy, especially at the moment in our current circumstances. And I'm finding myself literally jotting notes down, and then rather than ping off 20 emails to my team, literally just sharing that one note with them. So nothing revolutionary, but they are certainly helping me out at the moment.
Brilliant stuff, and often that it's actually those simple things. My sort of approach is sort of simple, keeping things nice and simple anyway. So the things that you can use to take shortcuts and make your life easier, like those, like Google Keep, even like with Google Keep, using it just to take photographs of text, printed text, and then use the OCR feature in it to lift that text off, so you can then edit that text rather than have to retype things like that. There's so many great uses for it. Thank you so much for sharing those, Russell. How about yourself, Ben? You got two or three?
Two. So the first one for me, Mark, you mentioned it earlier on, Google Sheets. I think if you can master a spreadsheet, and for me, seeing as we're a Google-centric school, it's been Google Sheets. I've been able to pull all sorts of data sources together. And if I can sort of use a very recent example, we have obviously now with COVID, we have collection procedures. So we have our children staggered in the hall. Now, we're not allowed to allow parents on site. Collection needs to be dealt with in a very quick fashion. So using Google Sheets, and a combination of Google Forms, came up with a system where parents at the gate can choose their children's name from a drop down on a form, and then up on the big screen we have sort of a rolling dashboard of the children, and then it pulls in their class color as well, and it's just been a massive lifesaver for us. And that's just a sort of recent example of just using a spreadsheet way beyond what people traditionally employ spreadsheets for. But we use Sheets so much in terms of building reports and things like that, pulling information out of tracking systems. And so I've become sort of like a Google Sheet ninja. And I remember there's an expression about sort of advanced technology being basically indistinguishable from magic. And I think for a lot of teachers in the school, they see me doing things on Sheets and they're like, how does that even work? And with the collection thing, a teacher said, how long did it take you to make it? And I was like, about 15 minutes. And it was just like mind blowing for her. So that's my number one. And number two, really relevant to the show, because we've actually been using StreamYard, which is, for the benefit of the viewers out there, is the platform that this is being delivered on, even though you might be seeing it on YouTube and Periscope. And I've been using it to do assemblies and things, and it's just been an absolute lifesaver. It's so powerful. And there are things like Streamlabs OBS and things like that we could have used, but StreamYard has just made my life wonderfully easy to manage, doing online assemblies. We had a webinar earlier on, and much the same as this. It's just so easy. So that is my COVID educational tech tool.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you. Got a few other comments come through. Khaled Alankar from the Hull College has come on with a shout out, recognizing what you were sharing, Russell, saying Google Keeps is epic. It's a game changer. It was Arthur C. Clarke who said that when technology is sufficiently advanced enough, it's indistinguishable from magic. Honestly, speaking of all things magic, I've absolutely loved the conversation tonight. Haven't you, Ollie?
Yeah, it's been absolutely brilliant. It's really great to hear that kind of authentic discussion and real life experience that both of you have had in your schools that's actually having a massive impact, not only for yourselves, but for the teams and ultimately the students. And that's what it's all about. We would love for you to both come. I think now's the time for our special announcement. If not, Mark, drum roll, please. We would love for you to both come along and share your experience further I'm guessing the screen is being shared now.
It is indeed.
Our Teaching, Learning and Leadership Conference on the 16th of October, which is only 31 days away. You guys have been absolutely stellar tonight, and I'd love to hear and learn more from you both. For anyone out there that's watching, it's a free event. Of course, that's really important to both of us. It's on the 16th of October, which is Friday of half term. We'll be broadcasting live from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. So you can dip in and out as you wish. And if I just click on the picture here, we'll post this on social media and on our site later, but this is our website for the event. It is a local and global event that's online, it's relevant and really timely, and you get to hear from great educators and leaders like Ben and Russell, along with a few other educators that we will share with you shortly. If you're interested in speaking at the event, you just need to click on this little icon here on our website, which we will release on our socials in the next couple of minutes once the show finishes. So please do check it out. If I could just dip back into this presentation here. Platinum sponsor for the event is classroom.cloud. You can find them on their website, classroom.cloud, or on Twitter, and they're at classroom.cloud as well there. We've got some great speakers lined up. So Mark, shall we release a few of them?
Yes, like pedagogical and leadership balloons. Our first speaker we got lined up on this slide is now. Congratulations if you're watching. If you're not watching back afterwards, big congratulations to Dr. Jeremy Williams, who just achieved that very, very recently. So congratulations. So really looking forward to hearing from him and his perspectives. And Ollie, our next.
Well, next is Asil Al-Malimi. She's assistant head and leads on Arabic and Islamic across my school, the British International School of Abu Dhabi.
Brilliant. I'm really looking forward to hearing from her. Our next guest is Sabe, who's not too sure what he's going to be presenting on yet, but I've seen him presenting when I went to the JES Summit back, seems like 15 years ago now, to be honest, but sort of tail end of February, right at the beginning of this calendar year. And he presented really powerfully about using technology in the classroom. So really hoping to hear another similarly inspirational presentation from him at the conference.
We've also got Kai Vasher, who's at Principal Muscat on Twitter, and he's also a board member of COBIS. So really looking forward to hearing what he's going to share on leadership and education within the Middle East.
Yeah, we're looking forward to hearing from Kai. We got Octavia Tiran as well, who is an executive leadership and coach person from who works with schools and school leaders. Is going to be sharing around all those things as well. So looking forward to hearing from her.
Interestingly, on Octavia, she was, I think I'm going to got this right, when I met her, she was the first educator in the Middle East to earn her drone coaching license. How cool is that? As well as, of course, avid supporter and friend of ours, Mark Ryan, who can be found online at Run and Rant or at Run Educator. He's PYP Specialist Leader at Raha International School, Abu Dhabi.
So we're super excited about this event. So Ollie and I are really passionate about sharing, and it's great to be able to bring a few guests on in the course of an evening session like this. And I'm sure you and the comments have sort of recognised this over the course of the evening in their support of the things that Ben and Russell have been sharing. But this is hopefully going to be a really fantastic event. It's free for everybody to come along, and once the whole event is finished as well, Ollie and I plan to add all of these different videos. It's going to be a live streamed event, obviously, continuous throughout the course of the day. But afterwards, we're going to take all that content and chop it up and turn it into a whole variety of learning playlists, so the schools can really sort of start to dig into all the different things that are going to be shared across the whole of the day. So yeah, super excited about it, aren't we all?
Yeah, cannot wait for it. It's brilliant, and I think some of the ideas that are going to be shared are fantastic, but then you look at the things that Ben and other schools are involved in with the UAE Research Schools Network. It's about connecting, collaborating and sharing for free, because that cross-fertilization across regions, across schools, across colleagues, ultimately ends up in the place that it should be, and that's benefiting the students. So really excited to be putting this on for everybody.
And if you are watching now, I want a sneak preview because we're going to get on it before we share it. The address is it's difficult. It's learnliveuae.com. So go and grab yourself over there. And at the very bottom of the page, Ollie didn't go down that low, but at the very bottom of the page, we've got a link through to our YouTube channel, and you can actually watch some of our episodes for the whole of season 2 directly from the bottom of the web page as well. So yeah, super duper. Should we? That's our last slide, isn't it, Ollie? I believe.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's just remove that back and bring everyone back again. Just to say a final thank you again to Ben and to Russell for joining us this evening. Really hoping you can join us on the 16th as well, both of you. Although, as I put my hand up, I completely dropped Russell in it and said he was presenting before I'd even asked him in a previous show. So thank you for being a good egg, a good sport, and stepping up for that, Russell. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you to everybody who's taken time to join us this evening. From Niall Statham, commenting on the event, saying it looks amazing. Well done, both with a great lineup already. Big shout out from Ivo Hanan. We've had Khaled. We've had Al Kingsley. We've had Mark Ryan. All sorts of people joining us throughout the event this evening. I hope you are excited, like we are, about the 16th. But for now, please keep yourself safe and look after yourselves. It's tough out there. So look forward to catching you in our episode next week. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.